So, the two-ending structure of The Handmaid's Tale. I thought that was a pretty sweet addition to the book. I've never experienced an ending like that in the dystopian genre before, but I know I've got limited experience in that, I guess, as far as literature goes. So I was just excited that there was more than one ending. I like even though we don't have like all the answers to like what ended up happening to the main character, I was just really excited that there was an opportunity for her to have gotten away, and maybe she didn't, depending on like the mood you're in when you read the book, but she could have, and that's encouraging. It's nice to not have every single character that I encounter die or have something insurmountably traumatic happen to them, even though living in the Republic of Gilead would probably be super traumatic. I thought the university part of the book was just a really good twist, like specifically the fact that like that they're encountering material about the Republic in what is pretty much a history class. I just thought that was really cool just because I'm a student in that kind of class, and I know I've talked about different historical periods in the same way that they're talking about like the kind of society that we just read about. So that was just really that was just pretty fun to read, actually. As far as like what I appreciate about the book as a whole, I just really appreciate the genre because of the opportunity for social commentary. I read a lot and study social justice a great deal, but like having books like this, like 1984 or Brave New World or whatever, it's just like, yeah, we know that it's fiction, but it raises the stakes because at least in like The Handmaid's Tale or even 1984, you can recognize similar problems that happen in the book that are happening in society. So like 1984, suddenly putting, cameras at streetlights and whatever else. So you have like people watching you and like what you do. Handmaid's Tale, the issues with like voting about, like people voting about other people's rights. So like whether or not some people should have a right to abortion, or whether or not like women should have access to like their own property or land, because people not being able to buy land simply because of their gender, or not having to being able to own anything because of their gender, is something that we've literally had to like work through as a species of people in the past. And so the fact that like an issue that's so real could be like put into a work of fiction and then expanded on into a way that builds a society like Gilead was just it's kind of jarring, but it's also just a more interesting way to talk about like big issues in society, and like social commentary in literature just gives me all kinds of life. So I just like these kinds of books. I appreciate these kinds of books just because it expands your opportunity to have a conversation that goes beyond like prose and punctuation and like those kinds of things. So it was fun to, not fun, but it was a more complex read because of those kinds of opportunities. My initial reactions to the Intuitionists, when I first started reading it, I was actually pretty bored. I just wasn't expecting much from a story about an elevator inspector. Like, I know that she's black and I know that she's female, which is definitely going to add more layers to the story just because of, intersectionality and racism and sexism and stuff. But at the same time, it's just like, elevator inspector. Like, okay. It was hard to jump into at first because Handmaid's Tale was a pretty, like, high-paced, like, intense book because you're trying to figure out how the structure of society works and what exactly a handmaid is. and all these different things to kind of like clue you into the story as you go. But like Elevator Inspector, and plus it was like a totally different world. Elevator Inspector it's too realistic on one. It's not, well, not too realistic, but it's very realistic. Like I can imagine anybody being a black female elevator inspector. Like that's not hard or new. I just wasn't expecting it to be very interesting when I first started. The further I go, though, the more interested I'm getting, even though my interest level doesn't entirely matter for the overall purposes of why I'm reading the book. But still, it's nice to enjoy the things that you study. As far as a quote and a question, my very first question when I started reading the book came from the first page. Very first sentence, actually, of part 1. It's a new elevator freshly pressed to the rails, and it's not built to fall this fast. At first I thought it was kind of just a quote, like the way some books start with quotes, but the more that I read, when I got to page 9, it said at the bottom, right before the break, she is right about the overspeed, Governor. She is never wrong. She doesn't know yet. And then that little sentence made that first quote not just a quote to me, because it felt like it could have been like not foreshadowing. I was trying to figure out if it was part of the plot as a whole, being like right at the front of the story. It kind of threw me off because like I know that there's going to be like an elevator crash from reading the back of the book, but I didn't expect it to be introduced that quickly. If this sentence is suggesting that it's already happened, so that I'm looking forward to seeing how that unravels throughout the novel. Another thing that I noticed was that, like on page 6, towards the middle of the page, where it starting with "it might fall," I like the way that the author is using like short sentences and then longer sentences and shorter sentences. I don't know if there's a word for that, but I just think it's more interesting to read. It might fall. She shuts out the sound of the super's breathing, which is a low rumble, lilting into a wheeze at the ultimate convexity of his exhalation. That's noise. The elevator moves. The elevator moves upward in the well, toward the grunting in the machine room, and Lila May turns that into a picture too. Like, I just like how the sentences are kind of being broken up with like short and little mixed together. So that was pretty cool. And yeah, I already have my discussion question. We're doing the quote, page 1. So I will see you tomorrow.